First of all, I want to get your take on this meeting with the OBR by the Prime Minister and Chancellor. You were on the OBR's committee. Just how unusual is it for a Prime Minister to visit the head of the OBR?
Well, I should emphasise it's the chairman of the OBR visiting Downing Street, not the other way around. But it's unusual for there to be meetings with the Prime Minister. There's regular meetings with the Chancellor, both of the chairman of the committee alone and the three members of what's called the Budget Responsibility Committee, of which I was a member during the course of preparations for a budget and other major fiscal events. This particular meeting obviously is quite unusual, and the context for it is quite unusual.
Do you welcome it happening?
Well, I welcome it
from it.
Well, I welcome it happening, but there is an element of closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. Clearly, one of the factors that has contributed to the market turmoil after the fiscal event last Friday was the absence of any accompanying assessment of the overall state of the public finances, which is what the OBR is obliged to provide twice a year, normally alongside the budget and major fiscal events. If all the government had announced last Friday was the energy price guarantee, the things that were designed to protect households and businesses about the consequences of high energy prices driven by events in Ukraine, I don't think there would have been a problem there not being an accompanying OBR forecast because those support measures are intended to be temporary and will be self-terminating when wholesale energy prices fall back. The thing that created the problem, in my view, was the fact alongside that, the Chancellor chose to announce the rolling back of national insurance increase and the slated increase in corporate income taxes that Rishi Sunak had put in place to pay for extra health spending, and those were intended to be permanent. So they potentially have implications for the sustainability of the public finances. Now, Liz Truss, during the leadership campaign, had claimed that the 30 billion headroom that was available to the Chancellor in March could be used to finance those. My very strong suspicion, given the deterioration in economic circumstances since the spring, is that that headroom is no longer there, and in all probability there would be a shortfall. So the extra elements announced last week have just simply worsened that shortfall and will need to be addressed somehow, quite possibly by cutting government spending.
Yes, and so what's the implications of that, do you think, for spending on public services?
Well, until we actually see the Treasury figuring and know what the Chancellor's time horizon is for getting the debt to GDP ratio back onto a sustainable path, precisely what is required will be unclear. But given the scale of the tax cuts in the event last Friday, it's pointing to substantial cuts in government spending. And it should be said that they would be taking place against a set of cash limits which were set a year ago, which assumed relatively low inflation and made no allowance for the fact that inflation, energy costs and so forth are substantially higher. So even accommodating what's happened within the existing cash limits would be extremely demanding. The Institute for Fiscal Studies have suggested that they need to be raised significantly by the order of 20 billion a year to even just to compensate for the direct effects of the higher inflation on the costs of government doing business. So to actually reduce public spending in these circumstances is very demanding. And it's of the order, I think, of what we saw during the first few years of the, well, I guess it's the coalition government from 2010 to 2015.
The austerity years is what you're saying?
The austerity years, yeah.
And what about interest rates? What's your forecast for how high they could go, given the rates of inflation we're seeing now and seeing some of the pressures on that rate?
I think it's very difficult to make concrete forecasts of exactly where they will go, because it depends on how economic circumstances unfold. Obviously, it depends on what happens to growth, and more particularly inflation. What the bank is concerned about is that the high level of current inflation doesn't get embedded in the system with higher wages, higher prices, higher inflation expectations in the future. We don't know how strong those so-called second round effects will be, so the bank will be monitoring them as they unfold. What is clear, though, I think, without any doubt, is that bank rate has to rise substantially more from where it is at the moment. And the bank, even before the fiscal announcement last week, had indicated that that was the case, and that interest rates would continue to rise for a while. So I think we're looking at a minimum of something in the 4% range. Some people in the markets are conjecturing as high as 6%. I wouldn't say it's impossible. Personally, I suspect it won't need to go as high as that, because there will be enough slowing in the economy anyway to moderate those second round effects, which the bank are so worried about.